Welcome back to Rich Lessons Podcast. We're back today with a very special guest, Alencia Johnson. I'm going to read a little bit about Alencia's background before we jump into the interview here. Alencia is the founder of 1063 West Broad, a social impact agency named in honor of her grandmother's address, where her values and legacy first took root. With a career spanning corporate communications at Geico, 6 years driving political and media strategy at Planned Parenthood, and senior advisory roles on the campaigns of Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, Alencia has consistently moved systems and shaped culture. She's a sought-after cultural commentator on MSNBC, CNN, BET, NPR, and in major publications like The Washington Post, Essence, and Glamour. A champion of women's rights and racial justice, she's been recognized on Ebony's Power 100, The Root 100, PR Week's 40 Under 40, and by Harvard as Woman of the Year. Her debut book, Flip the Tables, The Everyday Disruptor's Guide to Finding Courage and Making Change, is a national bestseller. It's a manifesto and practical playbook for aspiring changemakers, especially for those who've been told they don't belong at the table. Welcome to the podcast, Alencia.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be in New Orleans.
Yes. Welcome back. You know, it's hot and humid, but you come here, you have a good time, not a long time, and head back home. So we're just happy to have you here. So I love the fact that your company's name is after your grandmother's address. My grandmother is also like my kindred spirit, as you say, of your grandmother. So I would love to start at grandmother's table. So take us back to your origin story.
See, now you're going to have me crying. Because my grandmother, yes, she is my kindred spirit, as I put in the book. And God rest her soul, she passed in 2014. But she and I were extremely close. I spent so many summers in Chatham, Virginia. And she would also come up and visit us in Northern Virginia while I was growing up. And I'd be at the table with her, making her famous sweet potato pies and apple turnovers, but she would say that I was like eating everything more so than making everything and making a mess. But I was also with her so many times when she was making sure that, you know, whether it was this church community drive to make sure the kids had toys for Christmas, or a new family in the neighborhood that needed clothes or whatever it may be, that was my grandmother. She was at the NAACP meetings. She was volunteering on campaigns. When I worked on the Obama campaign, she was the #1 volunteer in Danville, Virginia. Like, I was getting calls from the team there. In addition to all of that, my grandmother was like the flyest woman in town. They called her the Fox, okay? And I have her fur coat. She had all the hats. She had these orange nails she always had. And she really showed me that you can be rooted in community, rooted in your values. Of course, she had a very strong prayer life. I am the, manifestation of all of her prayers. And yet you can also be into glam, you can be into culture, essentially, which is how I've been able to blend all of these things together, having the impact and the purpose and faith while also utilizing culture to bring more people to the table. And so my grandmother and I had like the best time together, and I probably get my sharp tongue from her too.
Yes. Sounds like grandmother had a very rich life.
She did.
And has led to so many amazing, your background and where you come from. Now, we actually first met at, I'm not sure if you remember this, at Afrotech in Oakland, and we were introduced by Kimberly. Yes. So long ago. It was so long ago, but Kimberly Wilson, a mutual friend, introduced us, and you were this shining star at Planned Parenthood at the time, and you really created and launched initiatives that are still around today, specifically Stand with Black Women. How does it feel to say, okay, I went into a space, I went into a place, and I changed things there, and I left my stamp, and years later, you can still feel it and still see it?
Wow, for you to remember that. It's amazing, because I think that was also the year Stacey Abrams was running for governor.
Yes.
My mind was all over the place. And remember, there was like all these wildfires, and so the smog was making it really hard for us. And yeah, what a time. So I remember that Afrotech. I think that was the first time Planned Parenthood had activated at Afrotech. And shout out to Morgan.
Yes.
Our friend. And Stand with Black Women, I started along with a couple of other Black women at Planned Parenthood, and a creative director, Deanna Dorsey, did the design for us. And for us, that was a call to action for not just the organization, but the movement to live their values. If you say you listen to Black women and value Black women, stand with us. And it also, that branding also allowed for people to enter the conversation with Planned Parenthood from whatever vantage point it may be, right? Because some people think that the conversation is only centered around abortion, but particularly for Black women and Black communities, there are so many ways we enter this conversation around agency about our bodies, right? And so it's helped us reclaim the narrative. A funny story, I actually didn't want to work at Planned Parenthood.
Oh, see, let us know. Let us know. We need the backstory.
I did not want to work at Planned Parenthood. It was after the Obama campaign, 2012. So what happens in a re-election campaign when the candidate gets reelected? You're kind of out of a job because your friends are keeping their jobs, right?
Yes.
And so I was trying to figure out what was next. And a friend of mine had called me and said Planned Parenthood was looking for someone that could actually engage Black media. And I knew of Planned Parenthood. I, am really in tune with my reproductive health care. I've had my own challenges, and the issue was extremely personal to me, but I didn't see myself reflected in the movement. I was like, this seems like a white lady's organization.
Yes.
And a good friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Black woman, she was like, listen, their political arm is one of the strongest in, progressive politics. And two, most importantly, why don't you go inside and actually be the change, right? And expand the table. And so that was 2013, and it was about like 6 of us Black women, in different positions across departments. And we kind of just locked arms and said, well, sis, we got to be here. Let's be here. Let's come from it from this angle. And now, fast forward, there's so many Black women in leadership positions at Planned Parenthood, one of which, Alexis Johnson, their president and CEO, who at the time was the board chair when I was there. And she, along with so many others, helped us navigate really like cultural spaces for Black folks. So that's why we were showing up at Afrotech, and they still do. Yeah. That's why we were showing up Essence Festival, BET Awards, working with Black writers and directors and producers to help out with some storylines, like really laying the groundwork for a lot of the conversations that are still happening there. And also making sure that Planned Parenthood wasn't sucking up all of the oxygen from some of the Black women-led organizations, the reproductive justice organizations, and building that partnership. And so it was a very unique experience because I had a title, but we were doing all the things, and then bringing my faith into the conversation. I'm a daughter of a pastor, and I love me some Jesus.
Yes.
And I didn't want people of faith to feel ostracized, because actually people of faith overwhelmingly do support people having agency over their bodies. So let's figure out how to talk about it in a way that makes them feel comfortable and part of the conversation. And so had I not been there, I wouldn't have been able to be part of this group of Black women. And I have to be honest, it's not just about me. I might have been, the spokesperson, and people saw, me more and in front of larger audiences, but it was really a group of us that to this day, we still have a group chat.
Oh, I love
that. And we look back at the things that we did and the things that we might have gotten in trouble for, but now, over 10 years later, we're like, wow, look at this rich work and legacy. And more importantly, we've talked about this in the book, understanding when you're overstaying. Like, I had to eventually leave, right? And so did some of the other amazing Black women, so that the work could not only continue, but expand and go far beyond what we were able to do. And so it's beautiful to be part of that legacy. As I was at the author pavilion at Essence Fest, there was a woman, actually my soror, I found out she was standing there with a Stand With Black Women bag. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like still here and still around. And so it's beautiful to be part of that legacy with so many dynamic Black women who said, listen, let's just step in here and be the change that we want to see.
Yes.
I love that.
Stand With Black Women is what made me start donating to Planned Parenthood, because I had my feelings about white women and white women feminism. So I was like, exactly. So you definitely changed the perspective for me, and I know a lot of other Black women on Planned Parenthood and how we were included, in that, and how we.
And I do think it's important because, to your point, I think people historically have minimized it to being just about abortion rights versus about everything else that goes on at Planned Parenthood. So I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and to be honest, if we think about what just happened with this sinister bill, there's nothing beautiful about it. And defunding Planned Parenthood is a part of that bill.
Yeah.
And it's going to shutter a lot of health centers that provide, abortion care, but access to birth control, sex education, all of these things that we know disproportionately impact us as Black women early cancer screenings, right? We know that the earlier you detect cancer, the better your outcome will be, right? And so it is so concerning and frustrating and challenging how, again, as a person of faith, the right has co-opted this narrative when the reality is the argument against abortion in the 1970s wasn't a religious argument. It was because the right started losing on segregation. They were like, oh shoot, we need something else. We can't lose on being racist, so let's come over here and drive a wedge on this women's issue. And I am so scared of what is to come even further. I mean, you all live in the South, you know the numbers of what's happening to Black women who can't get the care that they need. It is going to be very dark and devastating. I'm so grateful that you are now a supporter and a donor. And anybody listening, please donate to Planned Parenthood now more than ever.
Yes. And fun fact, before we move on, in Louisiana, we had historically been a Democratic state because Catholicism is huge here in Louisiana. And for the Catholic Church, the number one focus used to be poor people, right? And so that shift happened here too, to pro-life, super pro-life, and it changed dynamics of our politics. And so consciously thinking about like, how do we begin to push back against that?
I'm from Mississippi, so listen.
Right, it keeps getting deeper.
That'd be a whole different episode.
Right.
So,
so you mentioned being at the Author Pavilion at Essence, and you are a debut author of your new book, Flip the Tables. How was it like writing this? Take us on the journey and what that was like for you.
I tell people all the time, I've done a lot of hard things in life. This is literally the hardest. I think, honestly, I haven't had a child yet. I do plan to have children one day. And I was like, okay, maybe that will top this. But otherwise, this right here is my baby. Like, I have given birth to this. It was a challenge for me because when the concept came to me to really talk about, you know, how disruption of our community actually starts with ourself, disruption of self, and that journey that I was on, I'm in the journey that I talk about in the book of, you know, peeling back the layers, you know, challenging why I'm sabotaging myself and, you know, anchoring myself and my faith and working through challenges of self-worth. But as I was writing the book and I'm working with my editor, and she's like, well, you're not a therapist or a psychiatrist, so you know you've got to share about yourself. And I was like, girl, I'm a Virgo. And also, I'm from the South and the church. We don't put our business out there, right?
Right.
And I ended up putting my business out there with, you know, some parameters, right? And the book, so it was really challenging in the process, but it was also very much like a healing for me. And as I kept looking around and just being conscious and aware of what was happening around me. So I started writing the book. I got the book deal, I believe it was in 2023. And I was writing it majority of 2024, the beginning of 2024, before Vice President Harris became the nominee. So as we're thinking kind of everything's kind of normal, and then like I start the editing process when she had become the nominee. And so I'm just kind of paying attention to how the world's moving, but also the lessons that a lot of us learned in the pandemic of slowing down, centering ourselves, getting off the booked and busy hamster wheel. But I had to get back on it to promote a book, which was the crazy thing. And the one thing I did that really helped me, I know people who write and they're like, I wake up every morning and I write for like 2 hours and I go on about my day. I was like, that is not me at all. Because I am going to find some dishes that need to be moved to a new cabinet. I'm going to reorganize my closet. Like, I'm going to do everything but write. So I actually went to Mexico City for a month to get rid of distractions and really immerse myself in the writing, but also be inspired by another culture. And I don't think we really appreciate how much art and culture and immersing ourselves in unfamiliar territory, which doesn't mean safe or wrong, unsafe or wrong. It just means we're not used to it, right? Like we haven't experienced it yet, but pushing yourself out of your comfort zone gets you to that place.
Why Mexico City? I'm curious.
You know, I wanted to go somewhere that wasn't that far of a flight from DC. I love the Caribbean. I love a beach, but I will be honest, by like day 6, I'm like, I need something to do.
I'm over it.
I'm over this, right? And I said, you know, I could do Paris or London. I had spent a lot of time there. I get really inspired in Paris. But But I said, I've never traveled to Mexico City, and I heard so much about the food and the culture
beautiful.
and how beautiful it is. And I said, why not? I've lived in New York City, and if you live in New York City, you can actually handle staying in any city. And I also studied abroad in Shanghai. So I just wanted to try out Mexico City. And it was amazing to be there actually at the beginning of the 2024 election and the conversations that they were having with me. And I'll be honest, the book isn't actually deep in politics. It's actually deep in community.
Which is what I love about it. Because I think everyone expects you to talk about politics and maybe that be the focus of the book, but not so much. And I'm sure that was on purpose for you.
Well, it was on purpose for me because I don't even want to call it an evolution. We always say that we're pivoting or we are, we've evolved to something else. I just think we've expanded, right? We've always been these people. And so for me, this book is really kind of my story of peeling back these layers to fully embrace all of the pieces of me. And it can explain to folks who are constantly like, well, how are you doing this work with the entertainment industry and these major brands? But like, you come from politics and then all this stuff about the church. And I'm like, all of those things can coexist when you know who you are and your values are consistent, right? And you also I'm a people first person. And so when you always want to reach people where they are, you use every opportunity to do that, right? And so this book is the journey that I needed to give myself the permission to expand and to tell people that, there's more to me than politics. So you can go on CNN and MSNBC to see my hot take on what's happening politically. But honestly, politics is just an extension of our values. It's just one piece of how we act out our values. And this book is more about, how do we tap into what makes our own values, and also how do we connect with other people in community and our shared values, because I do think we could get to the other side of what's happening in this world politically if we understood each other from a value basis. And then if we also understood our own power, our collective power. There's so many more of us than those who want to continue to oppress us.
Absolutely.
And so this book, if you have the confidence to be yourself, and if you are courageous in yourself, my God, you are able to withstand any and everything. And you know that this community of 5 people and that community of 5 people and that community of 6 people together can start a mass movement. And that isn't political. That inherently, I think, is what makes us human. And I'm a deeply curious person. And so wanting to give other people that permission to do all of that as well.
So you give this visual of this meme, and you might remember this meme of the stick figure who flips over the table. And I had to laugh when I read that because I think everybody has been that stick figure. But what was your fed up moment?
Ooh.
And you say that word constantly, and it takes, you got to be fed up, right? To make a change. What was your moment that you felt like you were just fed up?
It's interesting because I think most people would expect for me to say something that's happened in the world. And I've just always been, challenged by the way, racism and sexism and all of that. I've always been, I guess I would say moved to action for that. That is second nature to me. What really made me flip over that table was when I tell this story on the book tour of how I had all the things. I was an entrepreneur. I, was traveling. I was doing well. Folks were calling, clients, speaking engagements, everything. It seemed like I had everything. And then I was sitting down in my beautiful corner apartment, all the windows, and I was sitting down, I was looking in the mirror, and I started crying. And I was like, I'm not happy. And why am I not happy? And to be honest, I talk about this in the book. I was diagnosed with OCD when I was 15 years old. So I've been in and out of therapy for a majority of my life. And I'm like, I'm in therapy. I am doing the thing, God. What's happening? And that was the moment when I was like, I'm tired of being stuck here. I'm tired of doing everything everyone else has told me to do. I talk about when I announced my agency, and I'm like, I shouldn't have actually announced that because people were throwing their expectations on it versus what I actually wanted it to be. I was tired of people telling me what kind of people I should date. Now, granted, at one point, I felt like I was dating the same person over and over again because it was the same lesson. I was like, none of y'all know each other. But I'm going through the same thing over and over again. There were some friendships that were just challenging me, and I just really wasn't happy. And I had to really be still and face myself. And I realized at that moment, I said, okay, if I want to get to the other side and have what God has promised me, I'm done. I'm done with everything that's in the way of that. And the biggest hurdle was myself.
Yeah.
And so that was the moment for me. I think it was in 2022, 2023, when I had a literary agent, but I was like just stalling on the proposal, right? Because at the time I thought I was writing Flip the Tables, the playbook for people to navigate this moment politically. And then at that moment I said, oh, no, this is completely different. And this is the disruption of self that we all have to go through. And so, yeah, it was me sitting there looking at my beautiful closet, looking at, my nice car, like all these things that the world tells us is success, right?
Yes.
Like the fact that I could still jump on planes and go to all these amazing events and do all these things, and I was not happy. And that's the moment that I got fed up.
Yeah. And you talk about this, like sometimes you are the red flag, right? How does someone identify that maybe they are the red flag in their lives?
Well, one, you have to have really good friends, because I opened that chapter talking about
no yes men.
one of my homegirls who I'm calling her complaining about some guy, and she's like, and I'm just expecting her to be like, yeah, Alencia, what? Of course he did that, and like you were right. She was like, well, maybe the problem is you. I was like, oh, we done talking. Like, we're good. And then, like, I went away and I thought about it. And I was like, okay.
That's a good friend.
That's a
that
good
sounds
friend.
like my best friend.
It's
good friend.
a really good friend.
Good friend.
And I appreciate her so much. I don't like yes men around me, right? Or yes people around me. And I had to, again, sit back and be still and kind of quiet the noise. I think we are so busy because we don't want to sit and face ourselves or what's happening. But when you remove some of the noise, I started to assess relationships. And in the book, I talk a little bit about romantic relationships, but mostly like friendships. Because like for Black women, like our friendships are everything.
Yeah, sisterhood.
That's sisterhood, right? It's what like, it gets us up in the morning when we can't get up ourselves, right?
Yes.
It checks us when we need a little chin check, right? And so when I was clearing out the noise, I was able to assess relationships and also my professional life of, I was successful by the world standards and other people's standards, but I actually wasn't achieving the things that I personally wanted to achieve and create and put out in the world. And I looked at the patterns and I was like, well, girl, the common denominator is you. And some of that red flag is the self-sabotage we do because we don't believe that we are worthy. It's the lack of faith that if this opportunity doesn't happen today, then it will never come again, or something better, more aligned will come. It is the removing ourselves because we have decided to have more control, right? Quote unquote control, right? We'll say, well, if I reach out to this person, they're not going to respond because they're so busy. So I'm not even going to reach out to that person. So we're controlling the outcome.
Yes.
And so I really had to assess all of my relationships and all areas of my life. I had to really also look at myself and say, well, what is holding you back from that? Why are you not meditating or spending more time in your devotional? And, you will be surprised how much of what we are, how much of the journey that we're on, it's because of our own actions that we're not where we want to go versus someone else preventing us from being there. I'm not saying that there aren't systemic issues out there that are very challenging for Black women, for Black folks, for women, because this book is for everybody. But the reality is there's a lot of parts in our journey that we can change by just literally changing ourselves. And also realizing like, there's some days I look in the mirror, I'm like, girl, you have been real trash today. What we gonna do? Because you over here talking about you wanted to get in shape, but then you really had that burger again. Like,
Didn't go to the gym, ate the wrong.
Like, that's nobody else's fault but like our own. And like, there's nothing wrong with the burger, but like, if you said that this was your goal and you're mad that you haven't reached that goal, you gotta have a little discipline.
So hearing you say that actually reminds me something that you talk about in the book. And you're talking about Shirley Chisholm, and you basically say she had sheer will, right? And irregardless of what was stacked up against her, based on just her will, like I'm going to do this and I'm going to show the world that we can do this.
That was it.
That was all she needed, right?
Yeah.
It was her own sheer will to want it.
Yeah, I mean, Shirley Chisholm, my late soror, the amazing Congresswoman. Oh my God. She inspires me so much. And I have her campaign poster, her presidential campaign poster in my office. And I read her autobiography like once every few years during an election, just because, this was in the 1970s, but her wisdom is still relevant for today. And the thing about Shirley Chisholm, we like to think about we think that she was just facing opposition from people who don't think like her, but there were a lot of Black men in the Congressional Black Caucus that didn't want Shirley Chisholm to be there.
Yes.
Okay?
People say sometimes people are for what you are for, but not for you.
Exactly. And she was facing that. Then there was also, white feminists who weren't on her team, even though Gloria Steinem was a huge part of her circle, right? And so she was facing obstacles from everywhere, but was so laser focused on this movement that really centered working class people. It centered reproductive freedom, including abortion rights. It centered so many of the issues that we're still fighting for. And she just operated with an urgency of now. And if not me, then who? I have to do this. I've been given this opportunity, and I would be irresponsible to not use it. And so when I'm discouraged, to be honest, the first time I picked up her autobiography was the 2016 election.
Yes.
And it was probably about like October of that election. And I was just really challenged and really frustrated. I'm like, God, how am I going to get through this? Right. And her autobiography really helped me navigate that. And, I think there's so many lessons from her. We have always heard the quote that she says of, if, there aren't enough seats at the table, bring up a folding chair.
Yes.
I operate with that all the time of like, I'm going to bring my chair, and also I'm going to take it a bit further, because I believe she would have wanted us to take it a little bit further. If this table's not working, we're just going to flip it over. Right. And I think I believe that's who she was, and her legacy. There's so many Black women who I believe are part of her legacy. So many of us who obviously we never knew her personally, but because of what she did, and she knew that, right? That's the one thing about our ancestors that I try to remind people today, is that our ancestors kept going, understanding that they would probably never see the promise realized. Yeah. But they knew that if they didn't do that work, that we, this generation or the next generation, would be further behind.
Yes.
Imagine had our enslaved ancestors some of them had completely given up. Right? Imagine had, I tell this story, so I'm a Delta, I know I kept referring to my sorors, but I tell this story about the suffrage march in 1913. Yes, women got the right to vote in 1920, but not Black women. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen until Jim Crow and the Voting Rights Act, right? And had my founders and the other Black women who marched in that suffrage march not done that, that wouldn't have laid the groundwork for other people to continue the work for decades to come. And so we have to operate with this understanding that, again, I might not see the promise realized, but it is my responsibility to do the work now so the next generation can continue to push even further.
Absolutely. So I had a question when I was reading something in your book, and you were essentially talking about how do you think beyond your own self-interest to support community? Mm-hmm. And a lot of your book is grounded in community. And so my question is, how do you do that, but also ensure that you're centering yourself and taking care of yourself? Because oftentimes, I know for myself and people like you who do so much for people, right? How do you create that balance? Is there even a balance to create,
I'm trying to actually get rid of that word balance.
Yes.
Because to be honest, we hear balance and then we feel like we're not living a balanced life. So then we feel like a failure.
Right.
Right. And so I'm constantly trying to shift the language I use with myself, which I talk about that in the book, so that I don't feel like a quote unquote failure. Also, even as we think about it, my book is a self-help book, but I don't look at us as problems to fix. Mm-hmm. We're just humans to experience. And I had to change that perspective of myself, right? Again, as a Virgo, it's really hard to tell me that I am not something that has to be fixed. I'm just something to experience. So, and part of the book and why I was so open with taking care of yourself and resting and getting off the booked and busy hamster wheel is because, again, as we are people of community, as we understand being selfless, right? I realized that the work I was doing in the world was also faltering, right? Because I wasn't rested. I hadn't taken care of myself. So even if you can't take care of yourself because it is your divine right to rest and have joy, if you have to tie it to the fact that you have these people to take care of or this mission to serve, you are in better service when you take care of yourself. And this book is giving us the permission to do that, and also the understanding that it's not a binary decision. Joy and rest can also come as we are resisting, right? Yes. When people were saying like, well, where are Black people in this protest? What was it, like in April? And like all the Black people were like at brunch and the white folks were in the streets. And I was like, our protest just is in the streets.
Right.
We've got these boycotts. We have a lot of other things we're doing. And quite frankly, given this administration, we can't literally announce everything that we're doing.
Very true.
Especially when they're targeting Black and brown people.
Yes. On websites, faces on websites.
Exactly.
Literally targeting.
ICE is disappearing folks regardless of your status, right? And so we know how to be those people. And in order to, and I open the book with, and I'm paraphrasing it, this Alice Walker quote that actually got me out of bed after the election. But she was saying, you have to maintain a healthy soul in the face of constant oppression. And in order to have a healthy soul, you have to take care of yourself, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes a day. And I've talked to so many folks on this book tour, and Black women really show up. And the conversations I've had with Black women, there was this one woman who was like, I can't find 15 minutes for myself. I said, listen to yourself say that.
Yes.
You cannot find 15 minutes for yourself. And I didn't shame her because I'm sure we've all been there. I cannot find these 10, 15 minutes for myself. But then when you push that and you challenge yourself to think about the fact that the greatest relationship and the longest relationship you'll have in your entire life is the one with yourself, you will treat yourself as you were the most precious thing God created on this earth, because quite frankly, you are. And so that balance, well, not that balance, but that understanding of what it looks like, and also understanding that life ebbs and flows. So there are seasons when, yes, I might only have 15 minutes to really check in with myself. And then there are seasons where I do have like that hour in the morning to go on my walk, that 30 minutes to meditate in the afternoon or whatever it may be, and being okay with that. And that doesn't mean you're not going to be in service to other people. It's not going to mean that you are stepping away from your calling, your mission, your business, whatever it may be. To be honest, the more that I take care of myself, the clearer my vision is.
The saying is, you can't feed anyone from an empty plate.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you gotta, you have to be full yourself.
You do. And you have to, that saying of like, I can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
You can, other people and other things get the overflow. There was also, I think in 2019, yes, when I was on the Warren campaign, I just heard like God clearly saying to me, you are not to have a full plate at all times, because when you have a full plate, you have no room for me to use you. You have no room for the surprises. You have no room to actually then give a little bit more to someone who needs it. And I was like, oh, okay. That really started to challenge me on why we take on so much. And the other piece too, I think we've talked about this, when we decide to take on so much, we're also not giving someone else the opportunity to lead.
Yes.
We always want to say we want to lift as we climb, but we're blocking other Black women from being able to rise to their excellence and their brilliance. And to be honest, they probably have a better strategy than you do.
Right.
And that's actually okay. There's enough for us. And so that's how I approach it. And I believe I am in better service to my community because I take care of myself. And the reality is, to get through this time, we need real community more than ever, right? I am not as snippy anymore. So I can say hi to my new neighbors because I'm like, look, when things are going down, you probably want to know me so I can tell you what to do, right?
Yes.
But if I was so mired in what was happening in the world and I'm so burnt out, I wouldn't even be able to speak to people, right? And change their days. And I think we take for granted those small acts of kindness as not disruptive, but it will change somebody's life completely. And you're not able to do that if you're not able to be present. You can't be present if you haven't taken care of yourself.
Absolutely. So I want to tell you my mantra, and then I want to talk about what you said your mantra was in your book. So my mother used to always tell me, don't let your highs get so high that you can't touch the ground, or your lows so low that you can't see the heavens. And in your book, you talk about your journey with mental health and having to really take that back and reset yourself when you're at one of your highest moments in life? You were getting all the awards. You're on the 30 under 30 list, the 40 under 40 list. How was that for you? And what would you tell to others who are in that position where they know something's wrong, so that they don't reach their breaking point?
Yeah, comparison is a thief of joy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's easier said than done, especially when we are constantly on our phones and we are inundated with everyone's highs, right? But
highlight reels.
I like the highlight reels,
Yes.
right? The 15-second literal reel, and we think we know everything about everyone. And I had to get to a place of being honest with myself that a lot of those highs were covering a lot of lows happening in my life. Right? There were, some challenges in my family, deaths in my family. I mean, when my grandmother passed, Mrs. Ozella Bennett, it was riding high in my career. But here's my kindred spirit who I was talking to all the time about like what was happening in the world. I'm like, God, how am I going to get through this? I was looking at one time when I was doing really well at Planned Parenthood and I was traveling everywhere and I was so sick that even my manager said, you need to take a week off and go to the doctor.
Yeah.
I talk about in college when I was doing all of the things and I got burnt out to the point where I was in the hospital because I had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
That's not a badge of honor. And back to the repeated lessons, God's like, you can have these things, but you've got to actually be a better steward of yourself, right? We are, we have to treat our bodies as though they are a temple that we have to take care of.
Yes.
And so I started to, particularly when I announced my social impact consultancy, I did feel a lot of the pressure to like raise a certain amount of money, hire a certain amount of people, all of these things. And I was like, wait a minute, what was it that you didn't like about working inside a company? And who's to say, at some point I may go back to work in a company, who knows? And that's actually okay. But it was like, what did you not like about this last situation that you were in? And why are you chasing what other people have when that's not what I had for you? And so it really forces me to stay anchored in my faith, to keep the right folks around me, to stop comparing myself to other people's highlight reels, because we don't want to compare ourselves to their lows.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
I love both of you all. I admire both of you all for everything that y'all have been doing, but I would not trade shoes with you for every single thing that y'all have had to gone through to get to where you are. Yes. Right? And people will say the same thing about me. Mm-hmm. And so if we are constantly chasing what society has deemed as success, we're no longer chasing who we're supposed to be in the world. And we're no longer putting ourselves in the position to create something new. And so the highlight reel, I actually try now to not actually put such a perfect image out. I try to actually be real about how hard things are. I try to, be more open with people when especially a lot of Black women come to me about writing a book. And I'm like, this is my journey. Let me be very honest with you about this, right? And so it's so important for us to caveat that. And I actually believe that we are, as a culture, getting to a place of like seeing through all of that.
Yeah.
It's why, influencers, people are drawn more now to people who are showing everyday life, not the perfect, polished person, right? Because that's not working for anyone anymore. And it's definitely not serving us as Black women.
Yes. Now, your grandmother said, you might slow me down, but you won't stop me. And that has stayed with you as one of your mantras.
Yeah.
And how has that taken shape in like your life?
My grandmother said that to my grandfather, which is so funny. And the story, it is like the most famous story in our family. And when I first heard it, I was like, oh, that sounds like me. Because don't tell me no. For me, it is a yes or a not now or not the way that you're doing it. Because if it is like on my heart, I want to do it. And my grandmother really just taught me that, look, you will have obstacles in front of you, but if you are called to do something, that it is the right thing to do, you're going to keep going, right? And then I heard it another way when people always say, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness later. Yeah. That's basically what my grandmother was saying, right? And that she really was pushing against a society that tells women and Black folks, particularly Black women, that we are not enough, that what we're fighting for isn't actually going to happen, or, that we aren't worthy of these of a life full of joy and a bit of ease, right? And all of our excellence and brilliance. And so Yeah, that mantra stays with me all the time. And to be honest, people thought I was crazy for writing a book. People thought I was crazy to, like, over the past 5 years, just be an entrepreneur in this economy. But I might be slowed down by what's happening in the world, but this is what God has called me to do. So I'm going to keep going.
Yes, absolutely.
And I have to.
And you have to. And, you know, we always say, to be an entrepreneur, you might have to be a little bit
crazy.
but
A lot of it crazy.
It's good though, right?
I literally just told her the other day, we was talking about being crazy as an entrepreneur, and I was like, crazy is like a prerequisite. Like, you have to be crazy to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting though how, like, as we don't realize what we're doing as entrepreneurs is actually extremely courageous, right? Because we've gotten so laser focused on a vision. And part of this book, you know, getting to the lessons in this book, I had to step back and think about, what does it take to be an entrepreneur? And be proud of myself and be proud of the fact that for every 10 no's, I still kept going.
Yes.
Actually, for every 90 no's,
Right.
we kept going. And I don't think as entrepreneurs, particularly black women entrepreneurs, we actually think about how much of actually super women we are to go through this process that, I don't know about you all, but for me, it's actually made me a better person personally as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we always like to wrap up the conversations by asking our guests, what is one rich lesson that you've learned in life that may have cost you everything or cost you nothing?
Oh, I immediately thought about all the money that, like,
She's like, I would say you're a real rich one. Not even hypothetical rich, but you know.
Wait, but you all know
As an entrepreneur,
you're
yes.
like, wow, that was a $10,000 lesson.
You ever see the little memes? It's like, as an entrepreneur, like, one day you have like $1.59 in your account, the next week it's like 100,000, and then the next week it's like $5.
I'm like, wow, I'm tired of these, like, 5-figure lessons, Lord. What's happening here?
Yes.
But a rich lesson that is not necessarily monetary, it is the power to speak life over yourself. Again, I talk so much about it in the book, and, you know, my dad's a pastor, so my mom's first lady of the church. She gives all that first lady wisdom. And as I was growing up, you know, I would talk about things, whether it was at school or friends or jobs or whatever it is, and I would, you know, actually sow so much doubt. And she's like, you can change your circumstances by the way that you are speaking out loud and to yourself.
Power of the tongue.
Power of the tongue, right? And if you're not a person of faith, that's manifestation. So whatever you want to call it, speaking life over yourself and over your dreams and over who you're becoming and speaking out loud. And my friends, they'll be around me and they're like, you really do talk to yourself. I was like, I do. I have to motivate myself through this. And there are times when I have been in the trenches, whether for work or whatever it may be, and I'm just talking out loud of like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but I'm going to get through this, right? And so that for me is one of the richest lessons, in that we have the power to change our circumstances that doesn't cost or require so much money, or any, like, speaking life over yourself doesn't cost you anything, but the courage to just say something out loud that is different from what society is telling you.
I love that. Well, thank you, Alencia, for being just the right amount of salt and a whole lot of light.
Oh, thank you. Shout out to my favorite chapter. That's the end of the book.
Yes, and pick up the book, catch that reference, okay, and much more. Thank you for being on Rich Lessons,
Thank
Alencia.
you, Alencia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.